Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donahue and Sonia Mansfield talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy.
Welcome back to What a Creep. This is Margot Donahue, and my cohort in creepitude, as always, is the amazing Sonia Mansfield. Hey, Sonia.
Oh, my friend.
Hello, my friend. We are the podcast that talks about creeps from the past to the present. This is sort of a creepy event that happens that has some creeps around it and has creepy reasons why it happened.
Can't wait.
We do have the social media shit to talk about. We do have a basic Facebook page. That's where people go to complain about our language. It's a What a Creep podcast.
Yes.
And then
because we use salty language, fucking deal with it.
We do use salty language in this program. We're the most interactive in our Facebook group. It's a private group. You do have to answer a few questions before you can join. So please remember that before you ask your friends to join us, because sometimes they're like, I don't know. My friend just tagged me. I don't know. But that's at What a Creep podcast group. Ask to join. There's 3 little questions. We are at CreepPod on Twitter for now, as long as Twitter still exists, because somebody had What a Creep on Twitter for 10 years and never used it.
Serious creep.
We're at What a Creep on Instagram. Please follow us there. And we have an old-timey email, whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. And if you would like some stickers, send us your address and we will send them to you wherever you are on the planet of Earth, which is true. We do that.
It is true. We send them all around the world.
All around the world, the same song. Same old song. All right. We're singing and dancing today because we're going to be talking about some disco. But first, Sonia, do you want to tell them about the website?
Yes, go to whatacreeppodcast.com, and it's everything you ever wanted to know about our podcast, but we're afraid to ask. It has links to all of our past episodes, and in all of those posts are our show notes, because we source every single thing we do and we give them credit. So you want to do a deeper dive on any of our creeps, just click those links and read up, enjoy. We also have a link to our merch shop. Merch! Where you can get t-shirts and tote bags and journals and face masks that never go out of style. It's amazing. So do that. And we have a link to our Patreon page. You want to tell them about that, Margot?
Yes, Patreon. That's where you will find the What a Creep podcast. And we use the money really just to get like the news services and the software and the stuff like that, just to keep the show going. And we put up our first few seasons. By the way, today is episode 1 of season 20.
20. One more season and we'll be able to drink, y'all.
I mean, it's over 200 episodes that we've done.
That's a lot. And here's the thing. We're never going to run out.
We never will run out.
Never.
On that Patreon wall, we have our first few seasons up there. There's about 30 episodes that are really rad. And we also put out 2 bonus episodes a month. We just dropped one this morning. And we put out a newsletter.
And sometimes you get a newsletter and sometimes you don't.
You'll get one. It's going to be April, May. It'll be a spring one.
There you go. Y'all, I apologize if you're a Patreon and you're looking for that newsletter. I apologize. That is my bad. But you will get one in May.
But we appreciate
I set a calendar reminder.
She's going to get that shit done, y'all. And we want to say thank you to Kathy, Coda, Jeannie, and Alessia for joining us on Patreon.
Thank you.
We really appreciate that. But we also understand if money's tight or if you just subscribe to too many things and you need to pare life down, we get it. If you could just leave us a review wherever you get your podcast, a good review, by the way, that would be amazing. 5-star reviews make us happy. They give us the smiles. And I want to thank Shopsalot99 in Canada, who told us we are both adorable. Everybody drink. That's a reference to our other podcast. Thank you. And Kay Gallant, who just left us a nice 5-star review on iTunes.
Oh, thank you.
We want to thank you because it really helps us find our people and help grow the show, which is what we're always just trying to do. We want to be able to just do this for a living, y'all. So we don't have to
It's true. Somebody recently asked a friend of mine if we do this podcast is our job. I was like, LOL. Like, I was like, I wish, but it isn't. So
It's a lightly compensated hobby, but in a very nice way. And it's something we love to do. But yeah, we would love to be able to like go on the road and do stuff.
Yeah, we just want the world to be a little less creepy. That's the ultimate goal.
Absolutely. All right, Sonia, I think we've gone through everything. I'm just going to read a little bit of an intro that I wrote. And usually I write in the first person, but here we go.
Yes.
And I don't know if you saw it. I sent you the notes. I had to show you. There's a picture I need you to see.
Ooh, okay. I will open it right now. Here it comes.
Oh, and I misspelled demolition. Hold on. Let me just.
That's fine.
Okay.
Oh, yes. I see the pictures.
Okay. So this is what we're talking about. And that's on the artwork, by the way. Just look in your phones or just look online. You'll find it for yourselves. Today, Sonia and I were putting on our boogie shoes. Preparing to call bullshit on all of the excuses given for Disco Demolition Night, which occurred Thursday, July 12th, 1979 at Comiskey Park in Chicago, Illinois. That's where the White Sox play. I kept tagging the Cubs, and I got nailed for that one harshly.
Ooh, they don't
Sorry,
like that.
I'm a Yankees fan. Oh, everybody hates me now. You can hate me now. Anyway. Actually, Sonia's actually the big baseball fan. I'm more of the football fan. But anyway.
This is true.
So for funsies, Chicago shock jock Steve Dahl, we have his beautiful picture there. He created a stunt to destroy LPs on the field of the Comiskey Field, and the Detroit Tigers game. So it was a doubleheader. They had a rain out in May, so sometimes they have to play 2 in a day, which sounds exhausting to me. But
yes,
mayhem ensued due to the hyped and hopped up crowd of meatheads who had decided that things like Saturday Night Fever, partner dancing, and people who are not quote unquote musicians shouldn't have any success, much less be a part of the pop culture. All of this disco fuss, which, by the way, coincided with Anita Bryant's gay bashing on the news every night, makes us realize that fighting pop culture wars is a sad, furious, and deeply stupid tale as old as time. I will work on that copy. But anyway, we do have thoughts about this one, and I do have some sources. So we have Wikipedia, EDM.com, The Guardian. There's the news coverage on YouTube. All these links are in the show notes, by the way. You can look this up for yourselves. We don't make this shit up. ESPN had a story on Disco Demolition Night, Weird History, Black Girl Culture blog. HBO had an amazing documentary, The Bee Gees, How Do You Mend a Broken Heart? And they devote a segment to this, which is amazing. Cape Symphony had a feature called How Did Disco Begin? We also wanted to talk about this war, this culture war has been fighting forever. There's a lot that's old that's new again. There's the whole Bud Light boycott that's happening right now. You can kind of go straight back, as far as I'm concerned, to all this shit happening.
Yes.
I also linked an article that was the first mention of disco culture was actually in Rolling Stone magazine in 1973. Anyway, Sonia, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm so ready to go back to disco time.
Alrighty. So disco music began in the 60s. We had LPs, we had records, and then we had rhythm and blues music, and we had rock music, and there was dance music. And at these rock clubs where there was dancing, people would bring their LPs, and they would go, and the French called it discothèque. So it was a combination of discs, which were the LPs, and then la bibliothèque, which was the library. So if you had a library of albums and you would bring it to a club and play the music. This is what happens in the 60s. And in the 60s, rock bands would show up to these things. Everybody would go to the discotheque. There was nothing wrong about the word. No one was bothered by it. Jimi Hendrix would go, the Rolling Stones. They had them in LA, they had them in San Francisco, they had them in New York, Paris, all over the world. And then R&B music gains in popularity along with rock in the 60s. So, you have like Motown just as popular as the Beatles. Everybody listened to the music and just liked music. Then the 70s come along And there's this idea of rock music being a band, everybody plays the instruments, and you play big shows. And it's so Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, the Eagles, Fleetwood Mac. Mm-hmm. And this is what we call classic rock nowadays. But in the 70s, this dominated the culture.
Yes.
Days on the Green, these multiple day concerts, and these bands were making squillions of dollars, as my friend Margot would say. They make a shitload of money, and they fill stadiums with thousands and thousands of people. And so it starts to become seen as sort of like the dominant culture. You would hear like Fleetwood Mac on all of the radio stations. You would hear like the Eagles and all this on all of the stations. R&B music is really gaining in popularity in the 70s. And somewhere around 74, 75 is when disco really starts to be a thing. And disco is just a little bit different. With disco, you are meant to dance to it.
Yeah.
It is the whole point. R&B, you can make out to it or, slow dance with somebody or whatever. But disco is about dancing. Disco is about not just you going by yourself and being on the dance floor, whatever. It's about in being with other people.
Yeah. It was a social thing. It was.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I don't know if that was necessarily a thing at the time, but it was about getting on that dance floor with a partner.
Right.
And dancing. And a lot of the songs are literally about that.
It's all about dancing. I mean, yeah. And 70s, it's a weird amalgam because you have your classic rock, you have your pop music, and all those songs are about cheating or finding or true love and going to die from this true love. I mean, it's like all that kind of singer-songwriter kind of stuff. Disco was just fun. Disco was just, like I said, just to get people on the dance floor. Yes. And the thing about disco that makes it really interesting is that it's an amalgam of Black people, white people, people of different races, gay people, mm-hmm. women. And sometimes it is just somebody singing to a backup track. Yeah. Sometimes it's just somebody lip syncing. They really can't sing, but they just put an artist out there to be like the face for the song. Mm-hmm. And it's gaining in popularity. And then it kind of sort of peaks around 76. Studio 54 doesn't open up yet. There's still rock clubs and there's some dance clubs, but they tend to be on the outer boroughs, like we would say in New York. Like it would be more in the Bronx and Brooklyn and Staten Island, not so much Manhattan. Right. It was very much a gay audience, a Latino audience. And this is how I always think of like disco is like you could be a 4'10" overweight Black woman with no musical experience. Like you can't read anything, you can't play an instrument, and you could be a huge star in the disco world. Like the Weather Girls. Like you could just you can explode. Or the Bee Gees, which had this career in the 60s where they did pop music and ballads, a lot of ballads. Mm-hmm. And then somewhere around 75 they started recording in Miami and they start get that Miami groove going. And then they're playing R&B music and they're singing in falsetto.
Yeah.
There is this trend, like they were one thing and then they became something else. And in between, like their popularity dropped. Like it was like a big rebirth for them. But this was mainly like, and they were excellent musicians and they always had a really great band. I've seen Casey and the Sunshine Band play. Their band is great.
Yes,
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Earth, Wind, and Fire, Kool and the Gang.
Yeah.
Hollywood swinging. Like they were very talented musicians on top of that. I mean, but some people were just singers and that's okay too.
Sure. You had your groups like the Spinners and or the Commodores, like there was a band and it's singing in harmony. Disco, a lot of it was just one person singing and then maybe having a backing vocals to kind of enhance it. But somebody like Donna Summer, it's usually like just kind of one person holding a microphone and just entertaining a crowd.
Right.
All of this is kind of peacefully coexisting And then one day a movie comes out in December of 1977, and it's called Saturday Night Fever.
Just this little movie.
This little movie, it's based on a New York Magazine article that turns out to be not even true. The guy kind of made it up out of whole cloth. He just made it up.
I didn't know any of that.
Yeah. And it's about a kid in Brooklyn who, Tony, and he has a bunch of friends, and he's Italian American. He's young, and he's out of high school. He never went to college, and he's kind of figuring out what he wants to do with his life. And the guys, what's funny about it is him and his cohorts are these, straight seeming cis white dudes.
Yeah.
Very Italian, very much in their own whatever bubble. And they all wear disco clothes in this movie. They didn't in real life. That was just something created for the movie.
Right.
So they were mimicking gay culture while being hugely bigoted against gay people.
Yes.
And if you watch the movie, they dance in their own disco with other Italian Americans. There's nobody else, nobody different race there. They kick them out. They're very much in their bubble world. What happened with this movie is the Bee Gees just signed on early, and they just made this album that sold 30 million copies.
That album was
everywhere. And it was,
everywhere.
And it's a really good album. It's really good
It is.
music.
All of it.
All of it is great.
The Saturday Night Fever soundtrack you could absolutely not get away from. And you would see the album cover, and it's John Travolta, and he's like, he's striking a pose, and he's got the white suit, and he's on the disco floor, and you think this movie's just about disco dancing. FYI,
it's not.
It's not.
No, it's a hard R movie, as we would say. There's a lot of fighting.
Yes.
There's a sexual assault. There's a lot of racism, very casual racism. It's depressing in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And this is like anything that's trendy. And I remember this from Dirty Dancing, where I told you, like, I remember I was young and this movie becomes popular and I see it everywhere and I'm like, ugh, get it away from me. You can get sick of something,
Absolutely.
And you can also feel really annoyed by something. You feel like it's inundating you everywhere. Well, the thing with the Bee Gees and the white suit and this music is that they had hits like they would have 3 or 4 in the top 10 at the same time. It was just, then Yvonne Elliman had a big song. The Tramps, Tavares had a song. All these people, they were just huge hits. This movie does so well, but it's rated R, that the movie studio actually creates a PG version that they re-release, and then they make a shitload of money from that because now kids can go. So it became, all of a sudden, there were discos everywhere around the country because people are like, well, I can't go to New York. Why don't we have one in Philly? Why don't we have one here in Dayton, Ohio? Let's just say. So people were building them left to right and center. Like any place you could find, you had a disco night. And people wore their disco clothes, and they had the hustle, and they had all these dances that they were doing. And it all of a sudden, disco was everywhere. The Muppets had a disco album. The Rolling Stones had a disco song. Rod Stewart had Do You Think I'm Sexy?
Yes.
Which is a great song, by the way.
It's such a good song. There was like Disco Duck, Disco Duck. And you throw like roller skating in there. So then there was like people who would like disco dance and roller skate. And it was everywhere.
Everywhere. Disco lessons were popular.
I learned to hustle from a book.
Yeah.
I bought a book because I'm a nerd. Well, I didn't buy the book, by the way. I checked it out from the library. Thank you very much. So that I could learn. I was just a kid, but and then my 20-something friends did, when there was like a whole disco revival, we also found a book at like a used bookstore and taught ourselves how to hustle from the book again in our 20s.
The shit's contagious,
It is.
You get the fever, man. The movie does exceptionally well. It had no budget, but it had John Travolta, who it's hard to tell you how famous he was when he made this movie.
So famous. You know what I just realized too? We totally there was the TV stuff too. So there
Right.
was Dance Fever.
Yes, with Denny Terrio. That was on
Yes.
forever.
Yes. And then Solid Gold.
Solid Gold
started,
had dancers.
which had Solid Gold had dancers, and they played like whatever the top 10 music was, and they
Right.
would dance to it. Like, yeah, the Muppets, like everything. Everything
Esther-
was disco and Star Wars. It was everywhere.
Disco and Star Wars, that's the best way to put it. Like, and anytime you saw somebody, like they wanted to say, this is disco, you put a guy in a white suit. Like, there's just certain things that are emblematic of this
Yes.
thing. So this is 1978. You can't escape it, for sure. What also happens is that radio stations start playing disco music nonstop because that's all people wanted to hear. So
Yes.
rock stations started getting cut down. They started changing formats. And one of these people was Steve Dahl, who was 24 years old and worked at a rock station. And he gets fired because they're switching to disco. And he had like no notice. This is the life of a DJ, by the way.
For sure. They move around all the time.
There's no stability. Up and down the dial. I'm thinking of radio, WKRP in Cincinnati.
Yes.
He is furious because he's a rock dude. And he just is so pissed off. He gets hired by WLUP. It's called The Loop in Chicago. So he went from DAI to LUP.
Okay.
And it's a album rock station. He would say WDAI was disco DAI, disco die. Everything was about disco dying, death to disco. And he came up with an anti-disco army that were called the Insane Coho Lips. And I'm not quite sure. I don't think it's as filthy as I'm thinking, but the audience that followed this guy were insane coho lips people or just cohos.
Okay.
And he would say things like, you know, disco sucks. And they were t-shirts that say disco sucks. He would say it in
Yes.
between songs. He said in 1979 that he was locked in a war dedicated to the eradication of the dreaded musical disease known as disco.
I can't even imagine wasting your fucking energy on this shit. But
I mean,
okay.
yeah. I mean, he's very butthurt, as they would say.
Yes.
He would also said, I hate the taste of pina coladas. I'm allergic to gold jewelry, so there's nothing there for me. You have to spend so much time blow drying your hair. It's a waste of energy. Like, this is the reason why he hates disco. Now, it's
Also-
because he's stumpy and ugly. He's not hot. He's not sexy, excuse me. No one ever said that about him.
Yeah.
Ever. But he's a radio guy that's popular. In the 70s, that's like everything.
Yeah. Have you ever like hated a form of music, a type of music that you would do this?
No.
That you would, because I'll be honest, like country music's not
I was just
necessarily
going to
my.
say that country pop.
I was like, it's not my fave.
It's not my fave,
but I
but-
also have country songs I like. Like I like old Kenny Rogers songs, and I like old Taylor Swift songs. By old, by the way, I mean like early 2000s or whatever. But like, I don't think I would have ever worn a shirt that says country music.
Well, this is the thing. I'm going to jump. Well, by the way, Steve Dahl had his own parody song. What a shock. And instead of Do You Think I'm Sexy, it's Do You Think I'm Disco. Here are some of the hilarious lyrics. Do you think I'm disco because I spend so much time blow drying out my hair? Do you think I'm disco because I know the steps learned from all of that Fred Astaire? There were Fred Astaire studios across the country at the time.
Yeah.
He sends that across the country, and he's like, you know, Howard Stern, excuse me, had his ditto heads, like, or no, that's Rush
Yeah.
Limbaugh, but Howard Stern has his fans. But
Yeah.
he had his fans, and their whole thing was, and then when you really go into why does this make them so angry, it's because, and they will bitch about, well, it's dumb topics, and they're not playing instruments, and they're not doing blah, blah, blah. And they've been raised to believe good music is rock music.
Yeah.
White men doing rock music. That's what everybody should be paying attention to. It's okay if something else gets popular, but
This is what we get everything old is new again. This is what happens with movies, right? When like a Wonder Woman comes out and they're like, fucking woke Marvel, woke DC movies, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if something is created for audiences that aren't just like white men,
Right.
cis white men, then it is less than.
This is Quinn Cummings who I follow on Substack and other things. White men see white cis straight, white men are the de facto person.
Yes.
Everybody else, you're just not as good as. You can
Yes.
have your own thing. That's fine. Have your chick lit, have
Yes.
your gay clubs. We don't care, but don't bring it with where we are. That's unacceptable. And here's this music that doesn't, which is the Bee Gees helped make it super famous, like
Yes.
straight white men, but
Yes.
Women, Latino people, gay people, they were stars just from this. They didn't need to
Yes.
know how to play an instrument. They didn't have to sell out, Madison Square Garden to sell records. They didn't have to do any of that shit. They could be glittery. They could be gay. They could be fucking fun. And
Yes.
did not have to do with any of the language that they didn't have to write about going on the road and what a bummer it is or,
No, man, they just want to put on their boogie shoes and dance.
Yeah. And that's what some people want to do. You don't want to do that? Fine.
That's fine. They just want to burn, baby, burn.
They're in their disco inferno, man. So that's really what gets under their craw.
Right.
Because they're looking around like, wait a second, we didn't okay this. Why is disco everywhere? Ethel Merman had a disco song, like disco. And sure, I don't know if you remember when rap music first started getting popular, and then everybody had a rap song, and
Yes.
people freaked the fuck out.
Rappin' Rodney. No respect. No respect.
I just remember Eddie Murphy, boogie in your butt, boogie.
Oh my God, I played that song for my son a couple months ago and we laughed so hard. He was crying. He was laughing so hard. He's like, I ain't sticking no bumblebee up my butt. So funny. Oh my God, I die.
Every once in a while, there is a trend that happens, and then everybody's in on it, and then people get sick of it. That's just normal. The twist,
Yes.
whatever. Like, it's been happening forever. These culture wars are ridiculous. But this is also a culture where the white man isn't the lead of it all. There's
Yes.
plenty of room for everyone else.
Yes. Yeah, this is not targeted just for me, therefore it's trash.
It's not as good.
It's not as good.
It's
the worst.
I don't like it. It makes me angry. And where do I do with my anger? Well, I'm going to wear the T-shirts that say "Coho Lips," and I'm going to walk around and say "Disco sucks," and they started doing things like, the radio stations have their like promo cars, and they go to things on the weekends and they give their merch out to people, and they would like go to DAI things and like make fun of the people that worked there and scare them, and just a bunch of white dudes would just show up, be like, "Disco sucks," and it's
so shitty.
It's shitty. It's childish. It's just mean. Like, just enjoy what you like and leave people the fuck alone. Like, let them live their lives.
Seriously.
Life gets so much harder. You have no idea what's in store for you. Just save your energy. Enjoy what's good.
Yes.
Okay. So let's go to baseball. It's the 1970s. It's 1979. Chicago White Sox, not the Cubs. I will change that. They're not having they do these specials every once in a while. I've been to Yankee Day where they have like hat day, or they have a ball day, or they'll have a beer koozie day, or they'll have a whatever, And so Steve Dahl was very popular, and he had that parody disco record. So he gets in touch with the White Sox and says, "Why don't we have a disco night and we'll do a disco demolition?" Think about the Bud Light demolition, by the way. Just like 2 weeks ago, this happened.
Wait, someplace did a Bud Light demolition?
Yeah, where they had the trucks that were going over the beers. Did you see that? It was somebody had a cement truck and they went over beers.
Oh,
with it.
brother.
Yeah. Because God forbid one trans person who's an influencer got paid, what, like $15K to post something once on Instagram? A thing you don't have to pay attention to?
Yes. It's so ridiculous. I did see all the like videos of people like dumping out their Bud Lights or like shooting their Bud Light cans, and I was like, "What? You already paid for it. Like,
You're idiots.
What are you doing?"
I get it. And like back then, headphones weren't just like a part of people's lives. I mean, you would have to hear it everywhere you went and stuff, but still, like everything's so segmented now. Like I don't have to hear country pop. I don't have to hear EDM music. That's not my thing.
Yeah.
There's just the opera. I'm not really like, I get why people like it, but I don't want to hear it all day. I mean, but I don't go outside the Met and scream at people, opera sucks. Fuck you.
Opera sucks. Boo. Boo.
Put on some Zeppelin. It's like,
the only Sopranos I like are on HBO. Boo.
It's
like, who are these people?
They're just the worst. That's what they are. They're the fucking worst.
Yes.
So there's a disco night in 1977, and it does pretty well. 2 years later, once again, Steve Dahl was fired. He wants to go. He really wants to get back at disco because that cost him, by the way, a great job. But he got fired one place and got hired at another, became a star. Like, you should be fucking worshiping disco, by the way. I just thought of that. Anyway, yeah, boo-hoo, asshole. So there's a whole thing with the White Sox, so they're going to do a disco night. Once again, in May, they were a rained-out game between the White Sox and the Detroit Tigers. So they have to do a doubleheader in the middle of July. So that means it's so hot and humid.
It must have been so hot.
And they weren't selling tickets very well. They were selling like 5,000 a night, maybe. And they really wanted to increase their audience. And people always want a young audience. Nobody ever cares about the old audience. They always think if I hook a young audience, and they'll keep with me forever. So he says to the Chicago White Sox people, let's do a disco demolition night. And here's the deal. You bring 98 cents and one record, disco record. You can get in for free. So they set it up.
Right.
Harry Carey's, in the booth. Like, it's just very Chicago. And the first game happens, and there's like the guy is the disc jockey I was talking about, Steve Dahl. He's walking around in military outfit. It's too small for him. Like, he's such a dork. He's such a dweeb. But he's strutting around like the cock of the walk. Like, look at me. And it's 50,000 people show up at least. And they're expecting maybe 20. So there's a lot of testosterone, pissed off. They don't like gays. They don't like women. They don't like disco. Everything's offensive to them. Why don't you wear jeans and a T-shirt? I'm like, wear your fucking jeans and a T-shirt. No one gives a shit. Like, just, no one cares. But anyway, they're all in the stands, and the Sox are not doing well. And
that's probably not helping.
No. So they're getting kind of pissy. People paid nothing for their tickets, so they're getting drunk on beer. Mm-hmm. Some people smoked reefer, Sonia. Woo! And they lose, and then so in between, they have this stunt. So they bring out this big metal thing, and they take this big bunch of records. And what's known now is that people have talked about it since, that it wasn't just disco records that they put in there. People put in like Stevie Wonder, Curtis Mayfield. It somebody described it as a book burning, basically.
Yeah, it was black artists or anyone of color,
or gay,
that
women.
Yeah, this was not about disco music.
No, it was
about white male supremacy.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So they go out on the stand. They blow this thing up. It sets off a huge fucking fire. The crowd goes insane, and they storm the field. They're in between games. One of them being Michael Clark Duncan, the actor from The Green Mile. He was 21 at the time. He just happened to be at that game. He tried to steal third base, and then he got tackled. Now, he's 6'6", mind you.
I'm like, who tackled? Who had the balls to tackle
It had
him?
to be a bunch of them. It had to be like 4 or 5 of them. Like, he's like Thanos sized. I mean,
Yeah, he's like, I don't care about what you're doing with the albums. I'm taking a bass.
I'm
Fuck
taking
it.
third base. I'm taking it with me. Fuck it. It's mine now. You see this? It's mine now.
It's not what they mean when they say stealing a bass, my friend.
No. And people go crazy. They take over the dugouts. They're like looking for the players. They're stealing equipment. It's fucking mayhem. So the players get locked in their locker rooms. They can't come out because they're afraid. Like, these people are like maniacs.
Yes.
The police are called. A bunch of people are arrested. The game is forfeited, so the Tigers get that win.
The Tigers are like, Chicago.
And the next day, all the papers, everyone's talking about it because there were cameras everywhere. It was a big fucking deal. So it becomes this thing that people are like, death to disco. I hate disco too. I don't like gay people, and I don't like people in white suits, and I don't give a shit about Saturday Night Fever. Why do I have to blah, blah, blah? And it becomes, within a year, disco was a category at the Grammys, and then it was dropped. The name disco became like a big turd. Like, no one wanted to have disco on their label. So you could have dance, you could have music, you could have dancey music, you could have soul, you could have R&B, pop, but you did not label your stuff disco.
Correct.
So that went on for a few years, which is fucking ridiculous. Yeah. But it also, sure, it was probably overplayed and over marketed and over everything. Sure. Like anything can be. But, same thing with Star Wars and everything else. Like, you don't have to.
And it still happens. Like, we had this with grunge.
Yes.
We had it with hair metal. We had it with grunge. It happens with hip hop. It happened with like the Latin music craze that was like Ricky Martin to Jennifer Lopez.
Exactly.
And like everything in between. Like, and it all gets super mainstream and marketed, and now it's in Pepsi commercials, and it happens all the time with like every type of music.
Well, because we're all a part of America. We're all a part of the culture.
Yeah.
All of us are. It shouldn't be a big fucking deal. Lilith Fair. I remember people freaking the fuck out about Lilith Fair. Like, it's all just women and lesbians on the road together. Like, what do you care?
Yeah, what do you care? Don't go.
Then don't go. If you don't like the Indigo Girls, you're wrong, but you just don't go. Like,
also, I went to one of those shows. It was awesome, and it was
great.
so great.
Yeah.
Because FYI, no offense to all, hashtag not all men, but it was a predominantly female audience, and it was the nicest, polite audience. Like, sure, the lines for the restroom were stupid long, but other than that, like, the nicest concert ever. It was just a bunch of women going, excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, pardon me.
Sorry, are you in line? Oh, okay.
Are you in line? Well, I didn't want to cut. Oh, no, you could go before me. I could wait. Well, like, it's the nicest crowd ever.
But when things are not surrounded by the white male, the entitlement, they freak the fuck out. Van Halen can't get a new singer. We only like this one. I mean, people just kind of get... But
we only like this one.
We only like David Lee Roth, which, by the way, he's my favorite. But anyway, there were a few arrests at this thing. Nobody, the number of people hurt, it's like I saw this statistic, 0 to 50. I'm like, well.
Thanks for narrowing it down.
Thank you so much. There were
0 to 50.
Yeah, the White Sox were sold in a couple of years, and the guy that owned it basically like never ran a baseball team again. And in Chicago itself, like, their names are made fun of to this day. Now, what happens is that there's new wave music, which is basically disco with some rock in it, right?
Yeah.
And that becomes popular. I mean, and then in the 80s, like into the 90s, there's this disco revival. And those of us who listen to it our childhood, and we love our music from our childhood.
Yes.
We started being like, the Beaches are awesome. Like, what are you even talking about? Like, who gives a shit?
For sure.
The musicianship is amazing. Those are some dope songs. How Deep Is Your Love is the most beautiful ballad ever. Like, there's no reason to hate on any of this. And
I have a friend who plays in like cover bands here around the Bay Area, and he's in one. It's called like Neon Velvet, and they do like 80s music or stuff like that. And then but he was telling me, he's like, I've stepped in and have done like played in other cover bands that do like disco, or he's stepped in and joined like the yacht rock cover band Mustache Harbor and stuff like that. And he's all, those songs are so hard to play. Like, he's like, they are musically complicated. He just told me this like 2 weeks ago. He's like, they are musically complicated. They're harder to learn. Like, he was super impressed, basically, learning those songs.
well, we should all be.
Yeah. They're such good songs.
Steve Dahl went on to have a career. He stayed in Chicago. He's in the Radio Hall of Fame.
Ew.
Yeah. But that's our creep today. It's the Disco Demolition Night of 1979.
Good job, Margot.
Thank you.
It's so interesting because it's just nothing's changed. Like,
No, I was just like, yeah.
it's still just a thing. Like, every once in a while there's a group that doesn't like a certain kind of music and it turns into a thing again. And like, I kept thinking about how there was this like grunge and rock, or like grunge and like kind of like hip hop thing in the early 90s. And then you started to get like a merge. So you get your like Limp Biscuits and your Corns and stuff like that, where it's like this like new metal or something, where it was like hip hop rapping over like rock chords. And it's just music, y'all.
Kurt Cobain, who I loved and adored. I've seen Nirvana. They were great, and they're one of my favorites. But he would even say like, well, I don't like Eddie Vedder. I like this better than that. And it's just like, it's just music, dude.
Yeah.
He freaked out under the pressure, but he still was under that whole thing. Like, well, I need to be the tastemaker. People need to know what I think. And it should be like more like Dave Grohl, who like trolls the gay people that like the gay fascists. What am I thinking of? There's the
Westboro
thank
Baptist
you
Church.
Where the Foo Fighters would go on a trailer behind them and play disco songs and have like gay people running around with rainbows and shit like that.
Yeah, that music is just fun, and people who don't like disco, I feel sorry for you, because
you're missing
really
out.
You are missing out. I still listen to disco all the time.
Same.
I think it is super fun, and that kind of brings me into our like non-creep. So let me open up my doc here, because I did a lot of research on various non-creeps, and I will say potential non-creeps. And like, there's definitely like a huge connection between, I'll say, the disco divas of the 70s and like gospel music and things like that. And they have amazing voices, but they also tended to like really like love the gay audience when they were like, giving them money. Right. And then in the like later, like in the 80s and stuff, they kind of wanted to like renounce their life of sin. And so they like kind of cashed in and then cashed out. So they were harder to find. So what I decided to focus on was the idea that disco itself is like a non-creep. And so bear with me, y'all. This is where I decided to go. And I wanted to talk about some of the good things that disco did. And so let's start with, and you kind of touched on it already, how it saved dancing. Dancing was like, there was definitely a thing in like the 40s and 50s, but in the 60s, you didn't have like, you could just go and you could go dancing, but it wasn't like partner dancing, I guess is a good way to put it. And I would say that disco definitely brought all of that back. I would say it happened again probably in the 90s with country music
and swing.
And swing music. So, and oh my God. And there, talk about another backlash. There was a whole thing with like swing revival music. And then people were like, fuck swing revival music. Like, people are so shitty. So that is one thing that disco did. it also brought like the rise of the DJ, which you see all the time now in like hip hop and rap music and outside of that too, really. So that became a thing, and that is thanks to disco. And then there's the like social liberation aspect. There was
Yes.
You think like, so tons of gay clubs, obviously, and the gay community embraced disco long before Saturday Night Fever came out. And, and they built a lot of those artists up before and I'm going to put myself in it, people like me discovered them, right? So people like Gloria Gaynor, Donna Summer, Grace Jones, they all grew in the like gay clubs. That's where they found it. But anyway, it's not really about them. I'm talking about the social liberation aspect. These were people, they connected, they got together, they found their community. And then there's the activism that comes from that. So that is something that disco did. And it's also, like you touched on, a music that was way more inclusive than that people were used to. Like there was music that was like white music, and then there was the R&B music, which was black music. I'm putting that in quotes. And then you get disco, which was Bee Gees.
Yeah.
It could be anybody. Village People.
Right.
It's again, Donna Summer, Gloria Gaynor, Casey and the Sunshine Band.
We're great.
Kool and the Gang. Like all of these people. Like
Barbara Streisand. She did some
Barbara
good discos.
Streisand
Good
disco records. Like disco was for everybody.
Right.
There's the people that were like, it's not for me, but it was for everybody. So I think that's one of the things that makes disco awesome. It was also one of those, there was the idea of the indie labels and like major music labels, and disco, if you could just record a song, and if you could get it played in a disco club, you could be a hit.
Yep.
And you could make some money. Like you didn't need a huge record label to get on the radio. You could just, if you knew the right person, you could get it played in a club and it could go from there. And that's fucking dope. I like that. They also invented the remix, which everybody loves a remix.
Yep.
So I think that's important. And I just wanted to also point out that disco influenced pretty much everything y'all are listening to now. So like early hip hop, very, very influenced by disco, sampling all those disco hits in early hip hop. And let's be honest, hip hop changed the face of music.
Right.
And like things like house and rave music, also disco. Like everything you listen to today, probably inspired by disco. Ask Beyonce who her inspirations are. Ask Bruno Mars who he likes to listen to. Lizzo, Lady Gaga, Doja Cat. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right. Dua Lipa. Like all disco. Daft Punk. All disco. But we don't call it that anymore. That's all. So I guess that's my non-creep disco music.
I love it. No, that's exactly what we do. And you made a great case for it. And I appreciate
Thank
it,
you.
Sonia.
Thank you. And I really wanted to pick a singer for us, y'all, but it was a little harder than you think.
Well, this helps me segue into, please reach out to us for your ideas for creeps and for non-creeps, because sometimes we struggle coming up with the non-creep, but all those places I mentioned at the top of the show for social media, we love it when you use the Annie Potts GIF. We got one. Use that and send it to us, or just be clever and pick something for yourselves. Once again, our email is whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. If you like the sound of our voices, we also co-host a show called Dorking Out, where we just dork out about movies. We pick a movie, we talk about it, and then, usually an older movie, not something current. And then we talk about what we're currently into, what we're dorking out about. So what are we going to be talking about next, Sonia?
Oh my, this is going to be so good. We're talking about Consenting Adults. It is a 1992
erotic thriller
with Kevin Kline and Kevin Spacey.
former creep on this show, Kevin
Yes,
Spacey, with a
Spacey.
very ironically titled Consenting Adults, by the way,
Adults.
when you find out.
Yes. We have been both listening to Katrina Longworth's You Must Remember This, and she's doing the erotic 90s, and she did an episode about like Fatal Attraction, like kind of the children of Fatal Attraction from the 90s, and one of them is Consenting Adults, and we were like, oh, it's time.
We gotta
It's
do
time
this.
to talk about Consenting Adults, because this movie's bananas, y'all. It's going to be a good one.
It's going to be so much fun. And like I said, please follow us. Sonia, where can they find you?
You can find me at thesoniashow.com and The Sonia Show on Twitter and Instagram and the TikTok. Where can people find you, Margot?
You can find me on Twitter, while that still exists, at Brooklyn Margot. I'm on Instagram, Brooklyn Fit Chick. My site is brooklynfitchick.com. And I am at Margot Donahue on the TikTok. All right, y'all. I feel like dancing. What about you?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Stay safe.
Let's put on our boogie shoes and hustle on out of here.
Stay safe. Put on your boogie shoes. Hustle on out of here. Don't be a creep.
Be a creep. Thank you for listening to us talk about creeps. You can follow us at What a Creep Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
But don't follow us too closely.
You can email us your creepy stories at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com.
But please keep your dick pics to yourself.